Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. We're on episode 162, and I always love to start by saying thank you. I started this podcast really to guide people to connect on their spiritual journey, to guide people on their spiritual journey, to help people really understand the spiritual journey may not be as complicated as it needs to be. Didn't say easy, because sometimes we have some challenges along the way, and I'm sure this episode will cover some of those. But yeah, I really feel blessed with the number of people that this episode gets to, the number of messages I receive. Really does feel like a blessing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I am Nimesh and Radia. I am the host of this podcast, Spiritual Journey Path to Awakening. I love to guide people to shine their light. I have connected with Akashic Records, which guided me to start this podcast. I am also a spiritual coach and mentor, and I also guide people to learn how to read the records. So I love what I get to do. I get to guide people to truly shine their light. And what I create and this podcast wouldn't be where it is without my beautiful co-host who we've worked together for a few years now. And this podcast, I get so many messages about how vulnerable she is and how much she shares from the heart. So introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, Stacey Brown. Stacey, you want to introduce yourself?
How long have we been doing this?
A while, and yes, it doesn't get old. I have to introduce you the same way, you know?
Yeah. So, hi, everybody. It's really good to be here. I love this space and love what we've created, and the community is just overflowing. So, thank you so much. My name is Stacey. I'm an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader. I do a beautiful process with Nimesh that we think is quite unique to what we've seen from other people. And I'm also a mentor and coach, and I help people through challenging situations in their lives. I recently published my first book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender. It's available on Amazon and Audible. And to say that I am nervous today would be an understatement, but I feel like the audience hears that from me a lot.
Yeah, and I do feel, Stacey, your vulnerability is one of your superpowers. So your ability to connect to people just with you sharing who you really are is a powerful thing. So we normally pick topics in advance, but we don't script anything. We don't, whatever comes through, whatever's channeled at the time is perfect. I don't edit it. But this week's topic actually came from a suggestion from one of our clients. And she mentioned that nobody really talks about death and kind of the impact of death. And we'll for sure cover that in this episode. We wanted to expand it a little bit. So this week we're going to be talking about grief and spiritual growth, finding meaning through loss. And for me, our biggest growth comes through loss in many times. I'm hoping moving forward, maybe we shift the paradigm and maybe we don't go through pain. Maybe we also grow through love. So maybe give us the option. But if you go back and look through everything you've been through and your most painful memories, your most painful times, and you ask yourself, what did I learn from those? I think for most of us, we'll find that we grew the most, we learned the most through our grief. And grief comes in many forms. The obvious one is obviously losing a loved one and the impact of that death. But also for many of us, we are going through really a time of rebirth. And what I mean by that is our old self is dying and a new self is being born. And with that comes shedding of many layers, shedding of so many parts of us. And for many of us, we're struggling to hold on, and we're trying to hold on to our old self when really we've got to let go and embrace the new version of who we are. And we talk a lot about this podcast, so we'll talk about both. We'll definitely talk about the death of a loved one and the impact that can have, and the grieving process. But I know part of this episode will also dive deep on kind of grief and the spiritual growth and kind of finding meaning through that loss. And Stace wanted to expand the title. She felt she would share and be vulnerable with this topic. I know she's going through something. So, Stace, what does this topic mean to you?
Well, I think there's definitely two aspects we have to cover, right? We've got to cover the loss of a loved one and what that feels like in the human experience. And then we also have to talk about grief and loss of a different kind and what that looks like and how both it can impact our spiritual growth. I think for me, it feels really important that we address our client in the physical loss of things is what I feel prompted to. And buddy, you have a lot more experience losing loved ones than I do, meaning leaving their physical body. And I think one of the ways that we kind of came together was you were still in the early stages of grief over Sidra. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I guess the first thing to say is there's no right or wrong way to mourn the loss of a loved one. Everybody has different opinions, and sure, there's stages of grief, and everyone will tell you, get over it, move on. The first thing I'd say is whatever you're going through is your process, and nobody can tell you what's right or wrong. Both of my parents have passed away. It's been many years. It's going to be 30 years, coming up to 30 years for my dad. And it's like 13, 14 years for my mom. So it's been a while. I'm a lot more spiritual and I'm a lot more aware of what the soul goes through now. But I remember when my dad passed away, there was a knowingness that, because he went to India, and he'd kind of done, it's like everyone says that when you're going to leave this realm, there's a knowingness in you. And for sure, he had a knowingness because he closed out so many things. He said bye to so many people. And then he went to India, and kind of halfway through his trip, he passed away. And, at the time, I mourned his loss. He was much more spiritual than I realized. I wasn't that spiritual at the time. Mom passing away again. I wasn't there. I just left to go on a cruise, and I was so angry at the time because I wasn't there when Dad passed away. I was in India. I wasn't there when Mom passed away. I was away, so I was really angry with God. And I remember the cruise I was on. It was a Bob Proctor cruise, and he obviously heard what happened, so he kind of gave us before we left the boat. It was left the cruise. He wanted to see us, so we saw him in his room, in a private room, and he just said, what he asked me. I was with my sister and another friend and my brother-in-law, and he said, "Well, how are you feeling?" And I said, "To be honest, I'm really angry." I think I used different words. Part of my language, but I think I just said I'm really fucked off with God. I was really angry because I wasn't there when Dad passed away, and I wasn't there when Mum passed away, and I knew there was a knownness in me that Mum wasn't well, and I still left. I was really angry with myself, and you get messages when you need it most. And Bob Proctor just said to me, the thing you've always got to remember is you are exactly what you're meant to be. You are exactly where you're meant to be. And that phrase got me through the mourning period with Mum. And I'm sure my family would say they got annoyed with that message. And subsequently with my spiritual journey, and I'll talk about Sidra next, but with her help, I connected to Mum's energy. I connected to Mum's soul as it moved on, and I kind of recognized that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Me and my younger sister, so the two younger siblings, weren't there. I've got 4 brothers and 4 sisters, so she's definitely surrounded by love. But her message to me was that if we were there, she wouldn't be able to leave this realm. And it was her time. She'd consciously made a decision that she did not want to be a burden on anyone else. And I won't go through the details, but she basically had a process which would have meant she'd be bedridden for 6 months. So she said in the process, she said to me that she made a conscious choice. And her wish for me was to really continue making sure that the family unit, the extended family unit, survives and thrives. And I really feel that that's happened. But knowing that mom made a choice, knowing that she's in a good place really does help. And, the soul, that's an interesting thing, right? It's one of these things that probably as humans we fear the most because we don't understand it. It's just, I really believe that when we come and when we go onto this planet, we have zero control over it. So consciously, if we have zero control over it, why do we fear it? Yes, of course, it's the death, and I also feel it's unfulfilled potential, unfulfilled destiny. Have we completed everything we're here to do? And it's that journey of the human experience that we're in that we just feel like we may miss out on something. And also it's the unknown of what happens next. I've felt souls transition from this planet and transition into the other realm. It is a struggle because there's a shock, right? When you, depending on how you are and how ready you are, when you leave this physical realm, there is a shock. Your soul is a bit lost. There is a kind of a transition, but eventually and again, it's all different for different souls, but eventually you find your peace. There are souls here that can guide. There are humans that can guide souls and transition, and I know I've certainly done some of that. But it's always harder for those left behind. Because when you leave this realm, your soul continues, right? But it's always harder for those left behind. And it's that, people always talk about, why do people share how much they love for somebody after they've gone? Why can't they do it when they're living? And that's so very true. But it's, people are always going to remember how you made them feel, not what you said, not how much money you earn. So it's always something to be conscious of, is how are you making people feel? And, one of those things that you could do is write a eulogy for yourself. How do you want to be remembered? We always, there's a song from, it's a Drake and Nicki Minaj song, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. And that's so interesting, right? I mean, everybody does die, but does everybody live to their full potential? Does everybody live in the moment? So maybe that's your message from this podcast, is how much can you live in the moment? And the other thing to bear in mind when loved ones move on is their energy and their vibration is different on the other side. For example, my dad, I know he ascended when he passed. I felt it. I knew it. So I always assumed he was not near me. I always thought vibrationally, because he was busy doing whatever he's doing while he's ascended. But it's only when I was working with Stace, Stace channeled a picture of what my dad looks like on the other side. And it's a very, very angelic drawing. It's one of my most prized possessions. It's hung up in my lounge. But it helped me realize that the reason I can't feel his vibration around me is because his vibration is different on the other side. And I now realize he's around me all the time. So also, it's like when you connect to loved ones on the other side, be open to their vibration being different. Be open to feeling their energy different, and just call on them. Have a conversation. I know my mom and dad are around me all the time, and I can feel them. Dad's more of a guide. Mom watches over me and sends me love. And it's perfect. And we, through the Akashic Records, definitely connect people to their loved ones if they're around and if there's a message. But it's just, it is harder for those left behind. And the more that we can celebrate the energy and the vibration, the better. But the soul does transition, right? We are a soul having a human experience. Again, that's just my belief. So if we can focus on the fact that the loved ones are exactly where they need to be. I mean, I know my dad's around me. I know mom's around me all the time. Do I want them near me humanly? Of course. Do I want to have a human conversation with them? Of course. But I would still much rather have them around me energetically, having the ability to talk to them, than not. So, and again, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening saying, well, I can't do that. What if you could? What if you could have an open conversation with those around you and just talk to your loved ones that have left and just trust in whatever you feel their answer is? Sidra is a different thing, right? Sidra was my coach, mentor, guru, friend. I always thought we were going to do, spiritually take over the world together. She was the one that guided me to truly understand the healer I am. But she passed away in a fire, aged only 38 years old. And, mom and dad passing, they passed away in their early 60s, too young for sure. And, I do often think about what my life be like if they're still around. But on the flip side, Sidra passing and leaving this realm when she's aged only 30 years old was a shock. And she told all the close people that are close to her for many, many years that she wasn't going to be around. She wasn't going to be around. And, if you knew Sidra, she's a very spiritual being. She was always channeling. A lot of times she wasn't in her physical body. And, I kind of just laughed it off because I knew that our soul contract wasn't complete. And I knew that we were meant to do something. So when she left this realm, and when I heard the news, that she was in a fire and she had 90% burns. Ivana, who was always with her, she passed away straight away. And I was still at the time thought, oh, Sidra, she's going to make it through because, Sidra, right? But within 24 hours, she did pass away. And everybody around her sure did crash. And I did feel it. I did miss her humanly. But there was a calmness that came over me because I knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. I knew that she could help so many more people. And she quickly became one of my guides. And she was the one that pushed me to learn how to read Akashic Records. And honestly, I only learned how to read Akashic Records because I wanted to understand my soul contract with her. And I learned how to read Akashic Records. It's such a beautiful process. I started reading for friends. This podcast was started by a message I got through the records, which said, my voice, my gift. The mentorship program was channeled through the records. So the records changed my life. And whenever I open someone else's records or when I do a group reading, Sidra's always there. So I know she's watching over me. I know she's guiding me. And I know our soul contract's not complete. And this is, death is such an interesting, people see it as a beginning and an end. And I don't. It's another massive change in the journey. And like I said, I know Sidra continues to guide me. And interesting enough, Stacey's never humanly met Sidra, but she's felt her energy, she's felt her vibration. And her first visit here, she decided to come back for a month for the second visit. And actually, she thought it was to study Sidra's stuff. That's how much she felt her energy and her vibration. So, death isn't the end. It's the end of a cycle. And I get this is just my opinion and, kind of what happens with death and the impact. But like I go back, it's always hardest on the people left behind. Because the thing with someone like Sidra, she was followed by thousands. And when she left this realm, a lot of people were relying on her, right? And a lot of people did crash. And I really believe Sidra was preparing us. I really believe Sidra was preparing me. She knew that she wasn't going to be here. She always called me her trump card. And I feel that I never understood what she meant. But when she left this realm, I partly felt responsible for carrying on her mission, well, carrying on mine at the same time. But somehow it made me realize I was playing safe. It made me realize I was waiting for her to guide me to do what I was meant to do next. And it took away my safety blanket. And it does, so death and losing a loved one, it does cause you a lot of pain. And there's stages of grief, of course. And I remember, when mom and dad passed away, there were so many people around, and I just wanted everybody to leave me alone because everybody had an opinion of, don't cry or don't do this or don't do that. And I'm like, well, just leave me alone, because I needed to process. And that's the thing, when you lose a loved one, do you ever really get over it? People say get over it. Well, really, what are you getting over? Celebrate them, of course. Remember them. Why not? I still feel mom and dad around them. Dad's been gone 30 years, and I still feel his energy and his vibration. I still miss him. So don't feel guilty if a loved one has passed on and you still miss them. Oh, that's great. Remember them. But try and celebrate their life. Try and celebrate and remember the moments you had with them that made you laugh. Remember the times you hugged them. I now realize I wasn't there when dad passed away. I wasn't there when mom passed away, because I didn't see them with tubes in them. I didn't see them like that in a medical bed. So yes, I didn't get the opportunity to humanly say goodbye. But at the same time, I had the benefit and the pleasure to remember them when they were here physically, humanly. And, that was my journey. So whatever you've been through with a loved one, trust in your journey. Remember them, celebrate them, talk to them, feel their energy and their vibration around you. Allow them to love you from the other side, and you love them from this side. Again, there's no right or wrong, and this was just my opinion. How do you feel about physical death, Stacey? I know I went off at a tangent talking about kind of the human death. How does it make you feel?
I mean, it just makes me think of like losing my grandparents and how challenging that was. I was very close to them. They were a huge support system for me. So it makes me think of that. And even though it's been years, it still feels at certain times kind of raw and new. But I think things hit some waves.
So let me ask you, scared of death?
Scared of death? No.
Are
No.
you scared of maybe not fulfilling what you're here to do?
Maybe. Yeah.
And if I was to be honest with myself, I'm not scared of death. Am I worried that I don't complete what I'm here to do? Yeah, maybe. I worry about the people I leave behind and the impact I would have if I'm not here. Which is interesting because I don't have any kids. Not married, but I know I have a lot of people around me that love me, and I know me not being here physically would have an impact. So I guess that weighs on my heart. The act of death, I have no control over it. So what I can't control, I can't change. And I try and let that go as much as possible. And I get that's easy, right? That's easy for me to say. But for our listeners, maybe ask that question. How do you feel about death? Why does it scare you? And I go back to that question. What would you want your eulogy to be? Focus on living rather than dying. So Stace, then going on to the death of self, finding meaning through loss from a more of a spiritual perspective. And I know, a lot of people are going through a rebirth, a death. And for whatever reason, as mentors, we feel things much deeper. And for whatever reason, you, over the last few years, have kind of gone through things at a really intense, accelerated level.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going through right now? So when we talk about spiritual growth and finding meaning through loss, what does it mean to you spiritually?
I think that I'm finally realizing the longer term impact of grief, and that it's not something that has a timeline, and it's not something that you can do in a certain way. I know that people have different approaches for grief, but at the end of the day, the grief can last a really long time. And I think there's part of me that's still kind of grieving some of the experiences that I've been through. and trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be now. If the old me has died, which I think that she has, then who is the new me? And how do I show up for her in the way that I showed up for the old me?
It's a really interesting question, right? Has the old you died, or is she still in the process of dying? And when the new you is born, because you still have your human experience, there's going to be a lot of you that has expectations, wants to know what's coming, can feel the new you being born, can feel your world changing like you have no control over it. Every part of every facet of you. In States, like I said, you experience things at a much more extreme level for whatever reason. It's kind of what you contracted in this life. So you do feel things at a more extreme level. But it is our wanting two things. One, it's our expectations of how things should be, wanting to know and wanting to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have control. And I know things around me are changing. I know I'm changing inside. I know I can feel things as being different. But there are certain things in my life that I know are solid, and that helps me with the craziness of the world outside. I know, for example, my home is a very healing place, and I've created to be a healing place, and that gives me like a base chakra, and it allows me to kind of be strong and because I know that as everything else is going crazy, I have the solid base to come back to. It's like my base chakra. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your situation, as much as you're comfortable sharing, but how uncomfortable it feels when your whole world, every aspect of it, is going through change. Because I'm sure a lot of people can relate to so much change happening, and so I'd love for you to share a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I am just going through such a massive life shift, and I feel like I have to be transparent about it. And it's dark. I mean, there are days that it is really hard to show up and do what I love doing and what I feel I'm meant to do. But my world has been turned inside out, and I don't really understand it right now. I don't. I met this amazing person that lives in a different part of the world, and we're talking about joining our lives together. And I'm feeling guilt because I want to do what's going to make me happy versus thinking about everybody else. I'm even grieving, like I'm almost in like a midlife crisis, maybe. Because I'm grieving even like the growth of my kids, and you're happy to see them grow and shift and live good lives, but the fact that I don't see them as much and those kind of things, like there's just a lot happening right now, Nimesh, and I'm not sure what to do with all of it and how to grieve and move forward at the same time.
Yeah, there's so many facets to what you just said. One, you again, hopefully you don't mind me sharing, but you've got 4 kids, and there's been times in your life where they totally consumed you.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it, right? It's that And in many ways, they were your purpose because you didn't have any other choice, right? You were creating a business, you were trying to raise, 3 kids, and the fourth one came along, but they were such a big part of your life. And now you're in a situation where you're co-parenting one of your kids, and the other three are fully grown adults leading their own lives. And I'm sure there's a part of you looking at your old life and realizing that that part of you is no longer here, and is, it's, how do you feel about that? And the second part is, I talked about death, kind of physical death, and kind of the soul transitioning is always harder for those left behind. But it's like, your situation, the way you described it, potentially you moving to another part of the world is going to have an impact on your loved ones. So in many ways, there's always an impact to that kind of change. And it's not the same because obviously you're still on the planet, but it is a form of grief. And it is a form of letting go of that old version of you and making a choice to put you first. And if you were to look back, and I know I don't love putting you in a difficult situation, but if you were to look back at your life, how often have you truly put you first?
I don't even know if I can answer that. I've been parenting children since I was 20. And when you do that, you give up a lot of yourself in order to take care of these other humans. But I definitely think that I'm even looking at like my dynamics and the relationships that I've had and how I've allowed those dynamics to be quite toxic. And there's part of me that's like, I don't know if I ever put myself first because I don't know that I knew how. And this version of me just shows up so differently.
So how do the people around react to you showing up differently?
I don't think very well. But is that because we're creatures of habit and we're not creatures that like change?
It's such a multifaceted thing, right? Change is the only constant in life. But for humans, for us in particular, it's the hardest thing to do because we do like things to stay the same. We do like things because we like routine. And there's, we ask this, we go deep on change with all of our clients, and we always kind of ask the question at the beginning, how do we feel about change? And everyone always says, "Oh, I love change." Of course I do. You love change when it's perceived good change. When it's disruptive change, how do you really feel about it? So that's one aspect. People want you to stay the same. The second aspect, and maybe the deeper lesson, is you just said, some toxic relationships. Maybe some people don't like us to change because they realize that they can't control you anymore. And you being your own person, making your own decisions, is something they're not used to.
Mm-hmm.
People are used to us always being there for putting other people first, which is why I asked you about how do you feel about putting yourself first, because it is hard. We're programmed to put other people first. It just is. We grow up and, we've got to do what our chores before we go out and play. We've got to, we have these responsibilities. And, when children have kids, of course the kids come first. But do we lose ourselves when we're raising those kids? And do we lose what is a priority for us somewhere along the way? So when we talk about mourning our old selves, it's not just us that are mourning our old selves. It's everybody around us that love this old version. And it's also then you going deeper and saying, well, hold on, are my soul contracts with these people who are struggling with this change complete? Am I holding on to some soul contracts that actually are complete? And not just when a soul contract is complete, it doesn't mean there's another facet of that soul contract that doesn't come alive, but it's that sometimes we hold on to things because we worry about, hold on, this person's been a part of our lives for so long. How am I going to cope with this person not being there because I'm so used to that person being there? But when you ask yourself, well, hold on a second, where am I in my soul contract with this person? Maybe you start to realize.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about, I know it's still up in the air and you're trying to work out how to combine lives when the two of you live at different parts of the planet. How does that feel to you? How does it even feel for you to, you've worked so hard for this person that's gone through so much over the last few years. You've kind of created a life for her and your own place and all the rest of it. You've got a routine, potentially upending everything you've worked so hard to create. How does that make you feel?
It's interesting because when I look at what I've created, I don't really see it. Like, I don't see it the way you do, I guess. So it feels scary, but it's more about like my like physical stuff. Like I'm going to have to give up a lot. And that feels really strange to me. I really don't even have words for it yet. I've been trying to like process what that would look like, and it gets me like pretty anxious.
Interesting, because, and again, for our listeners, the reason we're talking about this at such a deep level, and we're using Stacey's example because we really do feel everybody's going through a lot of change. So the questions I'm asking Stacey is always relevant to kind of consider how do you feel about them? And Stacey, let me ask you. I smile because I know sometimes my role with you and others is to expand, is to ask these difficult questions. And I, since the time I've known you, I've personally worked really hard to help you set up the world you're in. So I recognize how much you've gone through and how hard you've had to work to create this version of you. So it is interesting when you look at things from the outside and you see the impact, how much a person's changed. That's why we talk about journaling as the third person, because sometimes it's easier for you to see how much you've changed when you look at yourself from the outside. So, how much do you feel? Because a lot of people are feeling comfortable in their current environment, and there's sometimes a feeling that the grass is greener.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any part of you worried that as you talk about merging worlds, there's a part of you that wants change so much that is focused on changing your current world? And are you sure that whatever you come to next, how do you make sure that whatever you choose next is true to your heart, true to yourself?
I think by taking your time and making sure that you're secure in the decision. And I think that I've been playing out the various scenarios over and over again in my head, trying to come to terms with it and making sure, because there's no real room for error here.
Yeah, but what if there's no guarantees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what if there's no right or wrong? It's like when we're making major life decisions, we do want guarantees,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always a leap of faith. And the interesting part is the more that we become aware, in many ways, the harder it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're younger and, we just jump. But now we're aware of the spiritual growth and we're aware of the impact it has on the people around us. It's that it does become harder because our empathic abilities and we know the impact we're going to have at the people around us at a much deeper level. And actually we care at a deeper level because that's who we become, right? So it's it's interesting. It's like when people say be courageous, I don't think courageous is not having fear. I think courageous is having fear but doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm not telling you to do one thing or another. I'm just saying whatever you decide, there isn't going to be any guarantees, and that's true for all of us that's listening. It's that right now, it's like all of our clients and everyone I talk to, there's a real feeling that change is coming, change is inevitable. We feel it, and it's like a tornado coming, but it's like the episode we recorded about riding the wave. There really is a wave right now. And we just want to understand. We want to control. We want answers. But this really is a phase where we just got to ride the wave and just trust in our heart. How do you feel about how do you feel about there being a divine timing to trusting and making a decision? How happy are you just to wait and see what the future holds and trust the decision will come when it needs to?
I think I've been doing that. Even though I'm analyzing everything, I still think that I'm kind of waiting for that divine timing.
And I never asked you if you are waiting for, because I know you are. I asked you, how do you feel about it?
Oh, scared shitless.
And that's okay.
Every day.
But again, this is for you and all the listeners. If you go back to the last few years and how much you've changed and how much you've grown and how much the universe has showed off for you, and I'm sure there's some people listening saying, well, I don't really feel the universe has showed off for me. Look back at some of the deepest things you've experienced over the last few years and ask yourself, what did you learn from it? How much more spiritually awakened are you? How much more aware are you of you inside? And Stacey, I've seen how much you've grown and how much you've changed and the healer that you've become. And I also know how much the universe, your guides, God, source, whatever you want to call it, showed off for you. How much you trust in this next trustful that your space will be held and you'll be supported by your guides, the universe.
I have to believe it. Because it's what keeps me going.
I don't know if we have to believe anything. It's a trustful, right?
But I'm saying like the have to in that's what keeps me going.
So it's a choice. So you're choosing to trust in whatever's next for you.
Mm-hmm.
Even though your ego, your mind, your brain, every part of the human facet of you, as you said, is scared shitless.
Mm-hmm.
That's what courage looks like, right? It's being scared shitless, but doing it anyway. I mean, think about all the pioneers and anyone that's done something that's never been done before. There was always fear of failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that being fearful, but doing it anyway. I mean, you could just, if you wanted to, not change anything.
Yeah.
How would that make you feel?
Disgusted. I'm not I cannot stay in the same pattern that I am right now.
So what would your advice be to all our listeners who, I'm sure everyone's going through something because this just is that time. What would your advice be to anyone that's struggling?
Well, the first thing I think is to always lean into your faith, whatever that is, whatever your belief system is. I think leaning into that is probably the most important thing you can do. Wouldn't you say?
For sure. I mean, spending more time um, feeling the energies, connecting with your guides, spending time in nature, just the busyness around us is a direct reflection of how we feel inside. So if we can spend time connecting with our guides, meditating, being present, it does help us in some way to find peace. The irony is when you're going through a lot of change, that's actually when you struggle to do these things. That's so helpful. And I do feel that's part of the challenge of being human is when you're going through a massive change to just breathe and realize that everything is happening for you. You know, Stacey, you could have chosen an easier path and maybe focus on finding somebody a bit more local. But we can't always control where our soul contracts are, right? We can't always. Do you regret any of the decisions you made?
So if I regret any of the decisions that I've made, then I'm regretting the experiences that have come from them. And I realize I can't have one without the other. I have been evaluating the decisions that I've made and taking a closer look at them.
Okay. And what you said there was really powerful, right? It's like you can't grab one end of the stick and not the other. So you are who you are because of the decisions you've made. And how much you've grown, how much you've learned, and how much and what you're contracted to experience in this lifetime is all what it is, right? None of us have a time machine, so we can't control what's already happened, but we can focus on this moment and choose to integrate the lessons. And regret's an interesting thing. I don't feel I have any regrets. But it is a really interesting question because I go through some of my most painful experiences and I don't regret making the decisions that I did. Maybe I regret the amount of time I chose to stay in a painful situation.
Mm.
Being in pain was inevitable, but the suffering was optional.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to choose something, I think I stayed in certain situations and suffered more than I needed to. And whether you call that regret or not, who knows? It's just kind of how I process things. I don't regret what I've done, who the people I've made, and who the people I've met. But yeah, I could have maybe integrated my lessons quicker. I guess is the way I put it. And Stace, look, we could talk about this topic for ages, and I do feel there's deeper lessons that for us to explore, and I'm sure that's going to come up in follow-up episodes on different topics because I love how deep and how vulnerable you choose to go. I do feel it's a superpower of yours, and I thank you for it. And I'm sure our listeners thank you for it because I get lots of messages to say, "Oh my God, I resonated so much with what Stacey said." So, and just so everyone knows, by the way, it's like, oh, I always get back from Stacey. No, they're just saying that. So, if you resonate with what Stacey says, if there's something that you really connect with, then reach out to me, let me know, or reach out to her directly. I include both of our details to find us on Insta. send us a DM, and whatever topic we pick and however we share, we will share from the heart. So if there's a topic you want us to cover, please do reach out. Let us know. Like I said, this topic was inspired by one of our clients. And I just thought death was an interesting conversation. But then when you expand it and all the rebirth everyone's going through, it just felt like a really appropriate topic. And, the energy and the vibration we're in right now, the Lionsgate portal just finished, depending on how you feel about all the planets. Certain planets are still in retrograde. There's just an energetic shift happening. It really felt appropriate. And so, Stacey, as we get into the end of this episode, any final bits of advice that you'd want to share with people who are going through something, and any general prompts you think that would help?
So I think when it comes to having experienced loss, I think it would be a powerful exercise this week to write a letter to the person that you're grieving and just allow yourself the space to communicate with them on a different level, in a different way, through written word, and see what comes up. And then, you ask some expansive questions like, do you have any regret over the decisions that you've made? I think that's a powerful question to ask our audience. Do you regret anything? And then think about it. If you regret it, are you regretting then all the experiences that came along with it? So just some food for thought.
All interesting points. And, if this episode did trigger something in you, how do I say this right? I don't apologize for that. Because, when we're triggered about something, it does mean that we've got some healing to do. It does mean that there's some expansion happening inside us. I know part of my role is to be that expander, which is why, I was asking Stacey those questions. We've always had that relationship where we can go deep, and, she encourages me to ask her questions like that for whatever reason. But if something in you is triggered, then explore it. Ask yourself where was it coming from? And as Stacey says, if you are grieving a loved one, then allow yourself to grieve. Whoever says that you should be over it by now is not going through what you're going through. But do talk to your loved ones. Do feel their energies around them. And, me and Stacey, we love what we do. We love to guide people to truly shine their light, to really understand who they are. So if you are going through a personal rebirth, reach out. Our mentorship program is really is designed to help you, to guide you through your rebirth, to help you release all the facets of who you are and truly become yourself. And Stacey, as we close out, if you didn't have the techniques that we teach in your toolbox, how much more would you be struggling?
I don't even know if I'd be here. I mean, I have taken those things and actively plugged them into my life in order to be able to manage what I'm experiencing. I don't know what I would do without these daily habits, without these tools. They're keeping me going.
I'm surprised we haven't mentioned journaling in this podcast episode, because when you're going through something deep, journaling has to be one of your best friends. Releasing what you're holding on to and finding a way of doing it is so important. And of course, our mentorship program, we provide a safe space for you to truly share. But Stacey, I've loved sharing this space with you. I love how honest you are and how vulnerable you are and how you choose to go deep and be uncomfortable. And I know you do that to really help and guide other people. So thank you to all our listeners, sending so much love and light out. And Stacey, I'm going to hand over to you to close out.
Thank you, everybody, for being here again with us for another great episode. This is always a powerful space, and we want you to know that we're here to support you, and we're going to continue to show up. Thanks for spending time with us. Bye, everybody.
Sending love and light. Bye.